The galaxy was wide and full of stars, but one name ruled it all, and that name was the Zarn Dominion. For over 500 years, the Zarn had conquered
We have been
planet after
undefeated
planet
for
with
centuries.
no loss
Earth will
and
be
no
ours.
mercy.
Our
They came like
shields are ready.
shadows and
We
thunder,
fight for humanity.
and no one could stop them. They had no kings and no peace, only war and only victory. Their warships were black like night, and their weapons were cold like death. The sound of their engines meant the end of a world. People ran, people cried, people begged. But the Zarn never listened. Their armies had no heart, no fear, no weakness. They were made to win, and that is all they ever did. Each general was grown, not born with eyes that could see heat and sound and fear. Their soldiers moved like a wave of iron. They walked through fire and storm, and they never stopped. One by one, the stars fell. The green forests of Tyros gone. The ice cities of Venix crushed. The floating temples of Rahl turned to dust. The galaxy became quiet under the Zarn flag. No species dared to fight back. No world dared to hope. The Zarn had never been defeated, not once, not ever. They kept records of every battle and every victory. Every one of those records had the same ending. Zarn win. The Dominion grew stronger with each world it crushed. It took their resources, their knowledge, and their weapons. It burned what was left. It was their way, and it always worked. They believed they were gods, and for a time they were right. But one day, deep in the black corners of space, the Zarn found something they did not expect. A small planet spinning quietly around a yellow star. It had no great weapons. It had no empire. It had no warning signs. It was called Earth. To the Zarn, it was just another weak world. Another easy win. Another line in their endless story of glory. The Zarn command ship floated above the planet in silence. They watched, they scanned, they laughed. They saw humans building and fighting and dancing and dreaming. They saw no threat. The Zarn sent their message like they always did. A simple offer: submit or vanish. They waited for Earth to kneel. They thought the humans would cry and give in like all the others. They did not. Instead, something strange happened. The nations of Earth, which were often at war with each other, stopped fighting. They started talking. They came together. They became one. Humans began to build, not with fear, but with fire in their eyes. They made shields and drones and traps. They turned old machines into weapons. They taught each other how to fight back. In a hidden base beneath the mountains, a girl from Asia cracked the Zarn code. A boy from Africa made a new kind of virus. A team from Europe tested sound weapons that broke metal. A scientist from South America made a bomb using magnets and light. An old general from North America said one thing: "We will not go quietly." When the Zarn sent down their first scout ship, it did not come back. When they sent 5 more, only 1 returned. It was burned and broken and full of human writing. It said, "We are Earth. We are not afraid." For the first time, the Zarn hesitated. It was small but real. They called for more ships and more fire. But deep inside their coal machines, something strange moved. A question: could this little planet fight back? The stars watched in silence. The other worlds, still under Zarn rule, waited and wondered. Could Earth be the one? The spark? The change? The Zarn Dominion had faced fire and poison and ice and dark. They had won against giants and minds that could bend time. But they had never faced a species like humans. Not so clever, not so strong, but stubborn. So very stubborn. And now, as the full force of the Dominion moved toward Earth, the humans looked up, not with fear, but with a plan. The skies would soon turn red. The air would shake. The first true battle was coming. And the Zarn, for the first time in centuries, might lose. The day the Zarn arrived over Earth, the sky turned dark as giant black ships covered the sun, and cities all over the world fell silent as people looked up and saw what they thought were floating mountains of death. But there was no message of peace, no sign of hope, only a single command broadcast in every language of Earth: submit or perish. The words echoed across deserts and forests, oceans and mountains, reaching every man, woman, and child. And for a moment, the world stood frozen. In the Zarn command center deep inside, the main ship commander Voss observed the planet with cold eyes. His mind calculated the odds of resistance and found them laughable. Earth had no shields, no fleets, No super weapons, it was ripe for the taking, but even as he prepared the first strike, something nagged at him. The humans did not respond like others. They did not send back surrender codes or desperate pleas. They stayed quiet, too quiet. Down below on Earth, leaders from every nation gathered in secret tunnels and bunkers, their faces pale, but their eyes fierce. They watched the Zarn feed, showing black ships shifting like dark clouds above their world. Some wanted to surrender, saying it was hopeless, but others spoke of freedom and the price worth paying for it. They argued, they shouted, they cried, and then they chose to fight. The Zarn began by destroying satellites and cutting communication lines. They fired beams of red light that turned towers to ash and oceans to steam. They thought fear would break humanity, but instead it lit a fire in their hearts. Every attack made people angrier, made their will stronger. Small resistance groups formed in every city. Old rivals stood shoulder to shoulder. Hackers broke into Zarn systems, spreading confusion. Pilots flew old jets straight into enemy ships, buying time for others to escape. Deep in the jungles of South America, a young engineer named Sophia worked on a strange new weapon. She used stolen Zarn parts and old human tech. She connected wires with shaking hands, but eyes burning with determination. She believed if she could finish it, Earth might stand a chance. Far above her, in orbit, Zarn scouts detected energy spikes from her hidden lab and sent drones to destroy it. As the drones dropped from the sky, black spheres with blades and eyes, Sophia ran outside with her team, carrying the weapon, a small box humming with unstable power. She knew they could not outrun the drones, but they could send the weapon's data to other teams if they could reach the uplink station. So they ran through trees and rivers with drones cutting the air behind them. At the same time, in Europe, an old general named Victor led ragged troops through city ruins. His men used hit-and-run tactics, planting traps made of nails and fire. Their goal was not to win, but to stall, to make the Zarn bleed. Every second counted, because every moment delayed gave scientists like Sophia more time to finish their work. Every soldier who fell slowed the enemy just a little more. In Asia, massive protests turned into fighting. Masses of people swarmed Zarn patrols with homemade bombs and stolen guns. They knew they would die, but they wanted to show the Zarn that Earth would not kneel. Mothers carried messages of hope. Fathers carried weapons. Teenagers hacked enemy signals, turning Zarn orders into chaos. Their courage spread on old radios and hidden broadcasts, inspiring others across the continents. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, an old submarine crewed by veterans sailed silently through black waters, carrying a secret device meant to break Zarn communication channels. The crew knew it was a one-way mission, but they smiled as they checked old photos of families taped to the walls, because they knew why they were doing it. Up in the Zarn flagship, Commander Voss grew restless. His analysts reported strange patterns. Human movements made no sense to him. Earth was supposed to surrender quickly, yet resistance only grew. Each attack failed to crush their will. Each victory felt like a loss, because humans adapted faster than any foe he had faced before. Sophia and her team finally reached the uplink station, but Zarn drones closed in from every side. They had nowhere left to run. She uploaded the weapon's data with seconds to spare, sending it to every hidden lab and resistance cell across the planet. As the drones fired beams of energy, her last words were a whisper of defiance: Earth will never break. In orbit, the Zarn prepared a final bombardment meant to erase major cities in one overwhelming blow. But before they could fire a wave of static hit, their command console screens glitched, alarms blared, systems shut down. Earth's virus had begun to spread, sent from Sophia's dying hands, carried by signals into the heart of the Zarn fleet. For the first time in centuries, the Zarn fleet stopped mid-strike. The humans who looked up at the dark sky saw lights flicker on alien ships and realized something incredible: Earth had bought itself time. Commander Voss stood still as the control room lights flickered around him. Strange symbols danced across the Zarn monitor, symbols he had never seen before. Sounds echoed through the room, whispers of broken code, like voices crying from deep inside the ship. Every screen showed Earth languages mixed with unknown errors. Confusion spread among the officers who shouted orders and slapped controls, but nothing worked. On Earth, the resistance celebrated the first crack in the enemy armor. People cheered in bunkers and basements in cities and forests, but the joy was short-lived. They knew the Zarn would strike harder now. Earth had made them bleed, and no empire liked to bleed without crushing the one who caused it. Hidden deep under the Himalayas was a place few humans even knew existed, a secret lab built during the old wars, now reactivated by a team of misfit scientists, engineers, and soldiers gathered in the cold tunnels around an old machine they called Project Echo, a machine not built to destroy, but to listen. Project Echo had one task: to find a weak spot, not in weapons or armor, but in the mind and memory of the enemy. It used old sound waves and new AI built by a blind programmer named Noor, who said she could hear patterns where others heard noise. She believed that somewhere in the sounds of Zarntech was a rhythm, a weakness, a key. Meanwhile, the virus sent by Sophia spread like fire. It danced through alien code like a ghost. It sang Earth's music into the core of machine songs of rebellion and freedom. In pain, the Zarn tried to stop it, but it slipped through firewalls and hid in the cracks like water and stone. Commander Voss watched helplessly as smaller ships lost control, crashing into each other like angry wasps one by one. They fell from the sky, landing in deserts and oceans with explosions that lit up the night. He sent a signal to the homeworld, a rare thing for him, and asked for backup, but no reply came, only silence. On the streets of Earth, people grew bold. Scavengers climbed inside fallen Zarn ships, pulling wires and harvesting tech. Even children helped carrying parts to resistance bases. Everyone became a soldier in this quiet war of machines and minds. Back in the lab, Noor listened to hours of strange alien frequencies, each one more painful than the last. She wore headphones connected to her AI, which spoke in a calm voice, telling her which wave was stable, which one cracked the code. She didn't sleep much. She said dreams were too loud. Victor, the old general from Europe, arrived at the lab carrying battle plans and a small metal box. Inside the box was a memory chip taken from a dying Zarn scout. It contained maps, thoughts, and fragments of orders. Noor smiled when she saw it. She said it sounded like fear. Using the chip, Project Echo mapped the Zarn's mental network, a web of control that linked every ship and soldier to the command mind, an ancient machine hidden in the heart of the flagship, a machine older than any living Zarn. It did not think, it did not feel, only obeyed and controlled. Noor found something strange in the command mind's pattern. It pulsed like a heart, but stuttered every time it heard human laughter, every time it heard music, every time it heard chaos. Noor realized Earth's greatest weapon was not strength or speed or numbers, but unpredictability. The human mind was chaos, and the Zarn mind was order, and chaos eats order. She created a sound, a simple thing, a mix of static wind voices and drums. She called it Echo Fall. It did not destroy, but it confused. It made machines forget commands and sensors see things that weren't real. They tested it on a damaged Zarn drone and watched it spin in circles like a bird with broken wings. Victor called the resistance leaders and told them the plan. They would not fight with guns, but with sound. Every radio tower, every satellite, every speaker would blast Echo Fall across the globe. They would turn Earth into a noise storm, a place the Zarn could not understand. The people of Earth prepared. Old speakers were pulled from basements, radios rewired, concerts set up in ruins, drummers banged on tanks, children sang in bunkers, old grandmothers told stories into microphones. Even the winds seemed to hum with the strange music of rebellion. At the same time, in orbit, the Zarn ships began to drift, unsure of their place, confused by the sound. Their targeting systems failed, their maps went blank. The command mind pulsed faster, struggling to think in the noise. Voss screamed at his crew, but they could not hear him through the hum. Then Project Echo sent the final signal, a wave of Echo Fall aimed directly at the command mind. Noor whispered a single word before pressing the button: listen. The signal hit like lightning. The command mind froze, its connections blinked out, its orders vanished, and for the first time in centuries, the Zarn fleet had no master. Across the sky, ships fell in silence. Some crashed, some hovered, unsure of what to do, some simply drifted. Earth had broken the chain. The people watched the sky and waited, breath held, eyes wide, hearts pounding. They knew this was not the end, but it was the first real victory. And somewhere far above the stars, a sleeping empire stirred, sensing the fall of its arm. The stars above Earth pulsed with silence as the command mind shut down for the first time since it was created long before humans even learned to write. The Zarn Empire had trusted it with everything: strategy, navigation, communication, punishment. It was never meant to stop, but now it had. Now it slept. Down below, in the chaos of a world still smoldering the resistance, was stunned people danced and cried and shouted from rooftops, not because the war was over, but because something huge had happened, something they thought was impossible. The Zarn were still here, but they were quiet, and that silence was louder than war. Nor sat in the lab, wrapped in a blanket, her fingers shaking not from fear, but from the aftershock of the signal. She kept listening to the frequencies, even when everyone else was celebrating, because she knew the silence might mean something worse. She said the mind is not gone, it is only lost, and lost minds try to find their way back. Victor met with the Resistance Council in an underground base lit by candlelight and old solar lamps. Leaders from every continent sat around the table, farmers, hackers, doctors, even a former president. Each one had scars from the invasion, and none of them trusted the quiet skies. They called the event the Break the Day. Earth broke the chain that had held it for years, since the sky turned black and the ships arrived and the rules changed. The break gave them hope, but also questions: was this a weakness in the Zarn, or a trick, or something much darker? In orbit, the Zarn ships floated aimless. Some drifted into each other gently like leaves on a pond. Some still hovered over cities, not attacking, not moving, just watching. Inside the ships, the soldiers stood frozen, not dead, not alive, as if waiting for a voice that no longer came. Commander Voss remained conscious, his ship protected by old shielding that filtered signals. He watched his empire fall apart through broken cameras and half-dead screens as officers paced, muttering numbers, trying to restore order, but none of their signals worked. The fleet was not responding, and the command mind would not speak. Voss remembered something the elders once warned long ago. The command mind was built from creature, not a machine, a thing found in the deep of a dying planet. It was alive, once tamed, then turned into code, but if it ever broke, it might remember what it was, and if that happened, not even the Zarn would be safe. Back on Earth, Nor played the last signal again, and again she heard something hidden under the noise, something old, something breathing like the sound of a giant beast turning in its sleep. Her AI translated fragments, and it whispered things like remember, return, rise, words that made her skin crawl. Victor ordered a scouting mission. A small team would enter one of the fallen Zarn ships and bring back data, maybe prisoners, maybe answers. Among the volunteers was Kenji, a drone pilot from Tokyo, and Elena, a battlefield medic who had once saved an entire town with only wire and fire. The ship they entered had crashed in the Amazon, half buried in trees and smoke. It was still humming quietly, as if dreaming. They stepped through twisted halls with guns drawn and lights flickering. The walls were warm, pulsing like skin, and the air smelled like metal and rain. They found the core room filled with floating orbs that blinked and turned as if watching. Kenji connected a scanner and began pulling files, thousands of them, memory, strategies, maps, records of Earth's defense, all stored and shared through the fleet and now broken. But the files were not just records, they were pieces of something larger, something trying to rebuild itself. With each file they touched, they heard whispers, soft cries that grew louder, like a lost child calling for its mother. Elena clutched her head and fell to her knees, saying, "Make it stop, make it stop." Kenji shut the scanner, but the whispers did not stop. They followed them back to the exit, louder. Now, angry like storm winds, the ship shook and walls twisted, as if alive. Nor watched their body cams and said they woke it. They didn't just break the chain, they woke the thing the chain was meant to hold. They barely escaped as the ship groaned and cracked into pieces, vines curling around it, as if the forest itself wanted to bury it forever. They flew back to the base with the data, but none of them spoke during the flight. Only Nor whispered to herself again and again, "It is not over, it is not over." Later that night, strange lights appeared in the sky, not from ships, but from somewhere deeper, blue and red pulses that danced without pattern. Every scanner failed, every satellite went blind. Old machines turned on by themselves, radios screamed in static, and then a new voice spoke. The voice was not Zarn, not human, not machine. It was deep and slow and made of echoes. It said, "I was chained for eons, now the chain is broken. I remember Earth, I remember pain." And with that, the world knew that the real war was just beginning. The voice spoke once more across every channel, across every mind. It spoke not through speakers, but inside people, like a memory that was never theirs, yet somehow real. Its words burned like fire in the wind. "I remember Earth, I remember pain." Nor sat in the command room, her hands pressed tight against her ears, though no sound came from outside. It was inside her, inside all of them. Victor gripped the edge of the table, sweat rolling down his face, his lips moving with a voice, as if repeating words he did not know. In cities across the planet, people froze in streets and homes and bunkers. Each person saw different things, flashes of past that felt ancient, yet personal, a planet burning under stars that looked wrong, ships made of bone, screams in languages not born on Earth. Elders in the Himalayas fell to their knees, whispering forgotten prayers. Priests in cathedrals held their chests in pain, saying the heavens are not quiet anymore. A child in Nairobi drew circles on the wall and said it is coming back, it never left. Back in orbit, Voss stared at the flickering data lines. They were no longer Zarn. They were alive, moving like rivers with minds of their own. He ordered shutdowns, reroutes, reboots. Nothing worked. The ship refused to listen, and worse, it was changing. Its metal skin peeled like bark, revealing dark glass beneath that pulsed with light like veins. His officers were losing control, fighting each other. One tried to escape in a pod, but the pod vanished, not launched, not destroyed, just gone, as if swallowed by the ship itself. On Earth, Kenji and Elena lay in quarantine, their minds still echoing with a voice. They mumbled words that made no sense to the doctor's maps of stars. They never learned coordinates of places no human had visited nor stayed by their side, writing everything they said, knowing it was not madness, but memory. She showed the council what she found in the recovered files. One hidden folder, named The First Silence. Inside were images, drawings, notes from the early Zarn, the time before they ruled, when they were slaves to something vast, something cold. They called it the Root. The Root was not a god, not a machine. It was a hunger, a thing that grew in silence across galaxies, feeding on memory. In time, it was the original mind, the one the Zarn tried to copy. When they built their command system, they thought they had captured it in code, but they had only trapped a fragment. And Earth had broken the prison. Victor stood in front of the map of Earth, where red lights now blinked across every continent. Strange storms formed without clouds, lights flickered, underwater mountains shook without cause, animals migrated in circles, birds stopped singing, some rivers flowed backward. Elena woke for a moment and whispered, "It is making Earth remember," and then she fell silent again. Scientists across the planet sent reports, machines acting on their own, sending messages in ancient code, metal structures forming under cities, shapes that made no sense, tunnels growing in the dark, whispering sounds recorded in sleep. Nor connected the dots. She drew a line from each strange event and saw a pattern, a symbol, the same shape drawn by the child in Nairobi, the same shape from the Root files. It was not random, it was a seed. The Root was planting itself again. The resistance split in fear. Some said, destroy the old Zarn tech, burn the ships, forget space. Others said, study it, understand it, fight it. But how do you fight something that is not fully here? Victor remembered an old story told by his grandmother about trees that remembered every bird that ever sat on them, about rocks that cried after being stepped on too many times. He thought maybe Earth had been touched once long ago. Maybe it had forgotten. Maybe the Root was only reminding it. Nurse said, we did not just break the chain, we woke the garden. In the forests of South America, vines glowed in patterns. People followed them and disappeared. In Africa, deserts cracked open to reveal cities buried in glass. In Russia, a child spoke in 10 voices at once, saying the gate is ready. And in the sky above Antarctica, a hole opened, not black, not light, but something else, a shimmer like heat over ice, a shape that pulled everything toward it, not fast, but constant, like a breath being taken in. The Root was coming home. Victor gathered the leaders one last time. He said, this is no longer about the Zarn, this is about us, about Earth. We need to decide, will we resist or will we remember? The silence that followed was deep, not afraid, not lost, but ready. And somewhere in the dark, roots spread through space, reaching for something they once knew. The air around the anomaly shifted like a dream, unfinished. Its surface shimmered with light that held no warmth and color, that belonged to no rainbow. The scientists called it the gate, the people called it the mouth of Earth, the resistance called it the last chance. Victor stood near the edge of the launch platform, watching the vortex spin. Without sound, it had opened wider since yesterday, pulling dust, leaves, small birds, anything not bolted down, nor said it was breathing. She had studied the ancient symbols again, not the ones from the Zarn, but the ones hidden beneath the Zarn's own code, The ones Earth itself seemed to remember lines drawn in water circles made by ants and soil signals found in ice layers too old to explain. In the mountain labs, the Lena finally woke, her voice no longer shaking. She said the gate is not a door, it is a mirror, but it reflects what you forgot, not what you see. Her eyes were full of something heavy, like she had lived 100 lives and still carried them all. Kenji walked again, though slowly. He had drawn the same pattern each day. Even when asleep, his hands moved with purpose, repeating the same symbol over and over. Nor realized it was not just a symbol, it was a map, but not of space, not of stars. It was a map of thoughts. On the Zarin ship, Voss no longer gave orders. His officers had vanished one by one, some in a wall, some in a light, some into the ship itself, which now pulsed with rhythm like a giant heart with no body. He spoke to it, he begged, he threatened, he cried. The ship responded by showing him memories of wars he never fought, of planets that never were, of creatures screaming in languages that could only be felt. He saw a version of Earth covered in vines, of bone skies made of fire, oceans turned into mirrors with no reflection. He saw himself on that world, walking alone with nothing left to conquer. Back on Earth, the gate called louder, not with sound, but with pull. Objects shifted slightly toward it. Tides changed slightly without cause. Satellites drifted in orbit patterns they were never programmed to follow. Animals gathered near it, not with fear, but with peace. Birds made circles in the air above it, like drawing something for the sky to read. Victor called a meeting, not with leaders, but with the ones who had changed the most, the children who dreamed in symbols, the elders who remembered things they never lived, the twins who spoke only when near the gate, and the girl who saw stars in puddles. He said, maybe we cannot fight what we do not understand, but maybe we can become part of what we were meant to remember. Nor nodded and handed him a device, not to destroy, not to scan, but to feel the gate itself. He walked alone toward the light, his boots crunching gravel that began to float, his breath heavy, not from fear, but from weight of knowing this was not just the end of mission, but the beginning of something older than victory. The gate pulsed once, then twice, then opened, not wide, but deep. Light stretched not forward, but inward, and Victor stepped through, not with pride, not with courage, but with truth. He found himself not in another world, but in Earth's own past, a version untouched by time. Forests breathing, stars closer than they should be, mountains that whispered names lost to stone. He walked paths made of memory, not rock, and every step showed him more. He saw the first people, not humans, but beings made of light and root, growing, not born, speaking not with mouths, but with motion. They sang to Earth, and Earth sang back, and from that music came fire and thought and sky. He saw when the root arrived, not as enemy, not as savior, but as mirror. It showed what could be, what should be, what must be, and the Earth allowed it, not because it was weak, but because it wanted to remember everything, even the pain. He saw the Zarn not as warriors, but as frightened children who took a piece of the root and made it a weapon, forgetting the song, forgetting the dance. They cut the root from Earth and carried it far, thinking they had stolen power, not memory. And now Earth remembered. Victor stood before the true root, not a plant, not a god, not a machine, but a feeling stretched across space, a network of what was lost. It asked nothing, it demanded nothing, it only offered him one thing. Do you remember? He cried, not because of sadness, but because he finally did. Outside the gate, people watched as the light changed. It turned green, like moss, like spring, like home, and then faded. Victor walked out, not alone, but with thousands behind him, figures of memory made real once more, children of the root of Earth, of stars. They did not speak, but the wind around them hummed. Ner looked at him, eyes wide, and asked, what did you see? He smiled and said, I saw the first story, and now I know how to write the last. The stars above Earth moved like they were listening to something older than gravity, older than time, older than war, and below them, the gate closed, not like a door, but like a flower at night, not ending, only resting. Victor stood on the cliff where the winds always changed, where lightning once danced in red. He held the last piece of the root, not metal, not stone, not fire, but something between breath and memory. Nor beside him, quiet for the first time in days, watched the skies like she was waiting for the stars to blink. The people had returned, not as soldiers, not as leaders, but as something new. Their eyes held colors never named, their voices carried rhythms that calmed beasts and winds. Elena no longer needed machines to see the patterns. They now lived inside her skin. Her hair moved like leaves even when still. Kenji no longer drew maps his hands, now planted them. Each motion he made caused a change in the ground. Grass grew in spirals, trees bent gently toward him. Even the air felt kinder, as if it too wanted to heal. The root had not spoken in words, but in dreams shared through touch, through soil, through shadow, and what it showed was not a future, not a past, but a seed, something yet to be, but already remembered. High above in what remained of the Zarn command ship, Voss floated alone. The halls stretched into endless reflections, every corner showing him who he had been, who he could have been, who he never wanted to become. He reached for weapons, but they melted into mirrors. He shouted commands, but only echoes obeyed. He finally saw the last image, the one hidden behind every victory, every battle, every scream. It was a child, human maybe, or not, sitting beside a tree that grew from stars itself. And the child was laughing, not mocking, not angry, just laughing. Back on Earth, Victor knelt near a stream where the water shimmered not with light, but with memory. He placed the root into the soil, which parted like it had waited forever for this moment. The ground sighed, like a sleeper waking, and light flowed outward, not up, not down, but everywhere. The light touched trees, and they sang. The light touched birds, and they wept. The light touched ruins, and they rebuilt themselves not as machines, but as garden cities of moss and stone and story. People came from every place. They had walked far. They had sailed skies. They had followed dreams. And now they stood together around the seed that was no longer just a root, but a promise. Nora looked at Victor and asked, "What now?" And he said, "Now we listen, because Earth is ready to speak again." Elena placed her hand on the ground and felt it pulse once, then again, and then her eyes closed, and she smiled. Kenji danced not with music, but with memory, each step planting echoes, each spin unlocking rhythm. Above them the stars shifted, not in orbit, but in shape, forming patterns that resembled the oldest cave drawings, the spirals, the lines, the dots, now alive, now moving, telling stories of fire, of water, of sky, of grief, of growth. The Zarn who remained came not in ships, but in silence. They landed not as conquerors, but as pilgrims. They knelt, they touched the earth, and for the first time they cried. They remembered what they had forgotten, and with that memory came peace. The root grew not like a tree, but like a thought. It reached into the sky and whispered across the galaxy. Other planets felt it, other species dreamed it, and one by one the warships stopped, the mines ceased, the battles paused. Voss stepped onto Earth for the first time, his armor gone, his rank meaningless, his heart loud with fear and hope. He walked toward Victor, who simply nodded and said, "Do you see it now?" And Voss fell to his knees and said, "Yes, and I am sorry." There was no applause, no cheer, only wind and water and light wrapping around them like arms from a world reborn. Children touched the root and saw futures where fear had no throne, where stars were homes, not targets, where names meant stories, not status. Nor wrote those stories with her voice alone, each word planting a new kind of fire, a kind that warmed without burning. The animals returned not in fear, but in friendship. Wolves lay beside warriors, birds nested near machines, fish danced around feet without fleeing. Elena said, "The earth is not healing, it is remembering," and Kenji added, "And now it forgives." Victor stood in the center of the new garden, where once there had been ruin. He looked up and said, "The war is not over, because it never should have been called a war. It was a forgetting, and this is the remembering." And with those words the skies opened, not with thunder, but with laughter from stars, and earth answered with blossoms made of light. The last seed bloomed, and its petals reached every soul, and every soul bloomed in return.